All right, let's go over the prospect returns and all these trades right now. Baseball America's JJ Cooper, our friend, joining us. What a day, JJ. Hey, we haven't seen massive splashes left and right aside from Verlander, but we are seeing a ton of prospect movement. So let us begin, though, with the headline, JJ. Justin Verlander today gets moved from the Mets to the Astros. The Mets are paying a ton of money down, but they do pick up two pretty good outfield prospects. So what do you think of that move and in general what the Mets have done in terms of acquiring a lot of farm system talent?
They're paying for a good farm system, which credit to them, credit to Steve Cohen for the fact that he's willing to basically say, I'm willing to send a lot of money with this to make sure that the return I get back is a solid return. It's probably the biggest return we've seen yet today. And if he was an owner, if that was an organization that was unwilling to spend the money to buy off much of Verlander's remaining contract, the return probably would have been almost nothing. And so instead they get two of our top three Astros prospects. We don't have any of them in the top 100 right now, but Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford are both guys who aren't far from the top 100. Gilbert is a center fielder who can really hit. There's some questions about his power, but he's going to hit. Clifford's a guy who, if it all breaks right, is going to be that corner outfield masher, that thumper, but he's a little further away. There's a little bit less athleticism there. But to get these guys, as much as I love Justin Verlander, to get these guys for Justin Verlander at age 40 with the remaining contract that he has left, not a bad pickup for the Mets.
Hey, Coop, what's going on, brother?
Hello.
Hello. My question to you is Acuna's brother, man. I didn't want to say the name wrong, but
Luis Angel.
Hey, what do you think of him for one? Does he have the future like his brother does, or is he going to be that spark plug that the Mets need as he comes up through the ranks here?
I don't think he'd be as good as his brother, but that's a pretty safe bet to make because that would make him one of the 3-4 best players in all of baseball. But I think it's a trade that he immediately becomes one of the Mets' best infield prospects. Shortstop, maybe second base. They'll figure that out. They've got him. They've got Ronnie Mauricio. They obviously have Francisco Lindor. So that versatility doesn't hurt there. But he was he was easily a top 100 prospect for us. I also see, though, where the Rangers, he wasn't fitting with the Rangers. The Rangers can trade him because you can't even really map out a scenario where he was going to be part of that Rangers lineup anytime soon. Obviously, they have Seager. Obviously, they have Semien. And on top of that, they've got Duran. They've got Josh Smith. It's kind of one of those things where Acuna immediately becomes one of the better prospects in the Mets system, but he goes from an organization where he was blocked to an organization where there probably will be a pretty clear path to the big leagues in the not too distant future.
Is Cohen overpaying for these prospects? Because we very rarely see a prospect with value attached to him, essentially buying down these guys' contracts so they can get them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at this is a thing where I'm sure that there are owners out there today who are pretty annoyed by this because this is an owner who will do things that they won't do. They will never be willing to eat a bad contract to better the return. The Mets are quite willing to do that. The Mets are basically saying, okay, in hindsight, we spent too much on Verlander. We spent too much on Scherzer. That's okay. We can buy ourselves out of the problem and actually benefit from it. You've seen these other trades. We've seen trades on these, with players like these kind of contracts before, even good players, where the return essentially is, please just take the contract. There's always a player thrown in, but often that player thrown into someone who isn't even a top 30 prospect. Sometimes literally just for the chance to get rid of the contract. That's not the way Steve Cohen works. Credit to him. Like, it's going to speed up. This is a disaster of a season for the Mets, but it will speed up the opportunity for the Mets to get back from this disaster quicker because they're not just acquiring guys who are solid prospects. Gilbert's in AA, Acuna's in AA, Clifford's in full season ball. These guys aren't years and years away. If the idea is turning it all around in 25, well, these are guys who, if they all click, they should be there by then.
So if you were to take the haul that they got back and look at some of the teams that haven't done anything, the Red Sox, the Orioles, most likely is who we're crushing all day, do they have, and what would they give up, the prospects to have gotten these deals done?
Oh, let's just say again, I don't know if Verlander would have been willing to go to the Orioles, but the Orioles could have done this kind of trade prospect wise, and it would have been giving away probably their sixth and seventh and eighth and ninth best prospects in the organization. That's how deep the Orioles farm system is. It wouldn't have been giving up the Orioles' best players in their system. It wouldn't have been giving up the Orioles' third best prospects in their system. The Drew Gilberts, the Ryan Cliffords, those are good prospects, but those are guys who, if you put them in the Orioles system, they wouldn't crack the top six or seven. So it would have been easy for the Orioles prospect-wise to have done this with players who probably don't fit in their long-term plans.
So we just saw Jake Eater to the White Sox for Jake Berger. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about the Eater situation? How is he as a player? What do you think?
So Eater coming out, he was one of those guys who was affected by the COVID year. He was a 2020 draftee and didn't really get to show what he could do at Vanderbilt that year that much because the season got cut short. Credit to the Marlins. They were aggressive with picking him, and not just picking him, but then basically pushing him to Double-A right away. He was one of the breakout players in 2021. It looked like a guy who might be able to help the big league rotation by 22. But then he had an elbow injury, Tommy John surgery. He's still working his way back from that. He is still a guy, I would say, at this moment, isn't 100% back to what he was pre-injury. But that said, we had him ranked as our number 2 prospect in the Marlins organization right now. And assuming that, again, he keeps shaking off the rust, it's not outlandish in any way. He's at Double-A already. He was at Double-A before the injury. He could be part of that. He could be in the competition to be part of the White Sox rotation in maybe the very end of this year, but really, especially 2024. And for a guy, again, I like Berger. I like the pickup for the Marlins. He's a good fit to kind of pair with Soler as the power in what is really much more of a contact-oriented lineup. But that's a pretty good return for the White Sox in my mind, because they're not talking about adding a guy who might fit in a bullpen someday or something. This is a guy who has a chance to start and also isn't 5 years away. It's a guy who, as he shakes off the rust, could be there next year.
Are you worried about guys that are this tier of prospect, like you said, like a 6 to 8 for the Orioles, that are, lower level prospects? Are you worried about them going to an organization like the White Sox, who just routinely stink at player development? And is there another team that just doesn't do that? It doesn't even matter who they get. They just don't develop players.
I think that you see examples. I can't, the example that comes to mind is you look at the trades that the Braves and the A's did a couple of years ago. And it's not that the A's can't develop any kind of players. They've developed some players, obviously, in recent years. But they took a Ryan Cusick, and I think that Ryan Cusick would have developed much better in the Braves organization, where they are a team that kind of really takes guys like that and tries to accentuate their strengths. I think that the A's kind of took a more traditional approach with Cusick, where it's like, okay, you're gonna broaden your repertoire, and it hasn't worked with him. It hasn't worked with a couple of the other guys that they picked up for the Braves. That's an example that comes to mind. I do think with Eater and the White Sox, I do like a few things that the White Sox have done recently. I feel like that they're doing a better job drafting recently. Colson Montgomery is one of the better young shortstop prospects in the game, first round pick a couple years ago. Noah Schultz is definitely a name to watch. He's been one of the more interesting young pitching prospects in Class A this year. So they are showing at least some green shoots. Some, after a long fallow winter, they are having some guys kind of pop up a little bit. But that said, the good news with an Eater is this is a guy who's not as much a project as he is if the slider's back to what it was pre-injury, if the fastball's back to what it was pre-injury. You don't have to do a whole lot with him other than keep him healthy and move him on to the big leagues, because he went to Vanderbilt for multiple years. He already had success in Double-A pre-injury, so he's not that far away. Still some stuff to do, but it's different than if you're saying we're picking this guy up and he's heading to Low A and we're going to see how we develop him.
Is that development? Is that development? Are you developing a player who's, you just mentioned 2 first rounders? The Noah Schultz kid is 6'9", 220 pounds, first rounder. Like, that's not developing. That's just giving him a place to play and being like, hey, good luck. We'll see you in a year and a half.
That's staying out of the way, I guess is what you're saying, which is true in some ways. Like with Colson Montgomery, I'm sure they're doing some things with him, but yeah, at the same time, don't screw him up. Like I'll never forget Dylan Bundy years ago and talking to scouts about Dylan Bundy coming out of high school. And it was like, I just hope that the Orioles don't screw him up. That was basically the thing. And then a couple of years later, it was like, I think the Orioles screwed him up. So yeah, some of these guys, we are talking about first round picks. Those cases, in some cases, it's more of don't screw them up.
Okay, JJ, I've been excited to ask you about the Angels. They're going for it, even though nobody thinks they should. So did they give up a lot? Like, we had Jim Bowden on yesterday, and he goes, this decision to not just trade, not just hold Shohei Ohtani, but to trade away what they have in a very weakly rated farm system could set them back another 3, 4, 5 years. Do you agree? Like, I know that these guys might not all be future superstars here, but they don't have much. Every team has to have prospects that are going to make it to the bigs and be contributors.
Nothing against Edgar Cuero, nothing against Kai Busch. Those guys probably aren't going to be the guys that are the difference between the post-Ohtani Angels being successful or winning 65 games. Like, I think that the Angels farm system already, and I've just lost my earbuds, so I'll keep rolling for a minute, but then I'm going to duck off to grab it because I can't hear you guys. But the Angels, the post-Ohtani Angels, I don't think, assuming he leaves in free agency, they're not going to be 1 or 2 players away. They're going to be a lot of players away. And yes, this is thinning out what was already a very thin farm system. But that said, I kind of still think it makes a whole lot of sense. They are in it. Like, I mean, I do kind of think that, especially with the playoffs nowadays, we saw the Phillies last year, a chip and a chance, right? Like, if you get in, especially if you get in and you have the best player in baseball on your team, and you're getting hopefully Mike Trout back before too long, I don't think that trading, we had Cuero as a back of the top 100 prospect. Kai Busch was like again, the type of prospect he gets traded every year, not like a star or anything like that, not a top 100 prospect. I just think that that's a relatively modest cost if it ups the chances of the Angels making the playoffs this year, because let's just be clear, it's bleak next year and the year after in LA. If you're an Angels fan, if Ohtani leaves, whether you make these moves or not, at least now you've got a chance to have a shot at doing something this year.
Okay, Todd Father, he was okay with it.
I'm going to switch to my other audio so I can hear you guys.
He can't hear us right now.
All good. JJ will come back for us in just a second, and
he's got to put his ears.
We'll have a few minutes left with JJ. So anyone in the chat, if you have prospect questions for us or just about your trades, anything on the return, let us know. We'll ask him. He is the expert in that category. So we will bring him back right now. Okay, JJ, you got us?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
It's a live show. This is good.
Sounding great. So who do you think, JJ, is the best prospect that's moved? Like, or just your favorite deal so far from what you've seen? It doesn't have to just be today, obviously. Over the past week during trade deadline season, who have you looked at and said, "Oh, I really like that guy"? Right.
So far, I might say Acuna, and it's close. Like, I mean, again, the thing I wrote about this a little bit today at the Baseball America Live blog, which is the types of prospects. Like, we often hear things like, "Oh, it's going to require 2 top 100 prospects." Well, let's just be clear. When you say top 100 prospects, that's like saying, we need we're looking for a rotation help. Are you looking for front of the rotation help? Or are you looking for back of the rotation help? Those are very different. The thing I would say here is like, we're seeing so far this year, much like most years, you're not seeing the top prospects be traded. Now you hopefully will see a couple of second and third tier top 100 prospect traded. Last year we saw that. The Soto deal, we saw Robert Hassel, we saw James Wood both get traded. Now, prospects can get better, they can get worse. We've seen since that trade, James Wood has turned himself into one of the best prospects in the game. Robert Hassel is more kind of edging towards the back of the top 100 now. He hasn't developed as much. So the thing I think that you have to, we have to look at all these trades are, a lot of these trades are the level of prospect that teams are generally more comfortable in giving away in a deal. Not only giving away, but trading away. You're seeing guys at the back of the 100 get traded. The Cueros, the Acunas. Again, Drew Gilbert's not on our top 100, but he's not that different than Cuero or Acuna. You could say Clifford the same way. You're seeing, though, these are the guys who, if it all breaks right, they turn into something. At the same time, I generally think, I know we cover prospects, but the prospect cost on most of these deals is relatively minor. I look at some of the moves that have made yesterday, where you look at when Brad Hand goes to the Braves. It's an incredibly modest move. I'm not saying that's not Alex Anthopoulos doing what he did in 21, where he managed to rebuild an entire outfield and did it without giving away one player who in any way they regret trading away. None of them are still with the organizations when they got Soler, when they got Rosario, when they got Duvall, when they got Peterson. But they traded a non-top 30 prospect who's been Rule 5 eligible, will be Rule 5 eligible again after the season, and they got a veteran reliever who will fit right into their bullpen back. To me, if I'm a fan of a team that does nothing at the deadline, that does have to be frustrating, because the cost of lengthening your bullpen, the cost of adding a platoon bat, things like that is year in, year out exceedingly modest. Yes, Yordan Alvarez was traded for Josh Fields a long time ago. It does happen. Yes, Fernando Tatis Jr. for James Shields. It does happen. But usually it's like, oh yeah, I can't even remember what we traded away last year to get that veteran who helped us. Because generally it's fourth, fifth tier prospects if you're willing to take on salary.
Talking to Tigers and Dodgers fans now, the Eduardo Rodriguez trade was together. I would love you to write a book about all the prospects that were supposed to be in deals that never happened. But give us an idea of what would Eduardo Rodriguez have gotten back in a comparable type of trade?
Oh, that would be a move that, again, right, the rumors are that it was it probably would have been multiple players. It probably, again, from one of the best farm systems in baseball, like that would have made a difference for the Tigers. Now, I'll be interested to see if they end up turning around and trading him somewhere else. But if you told me that the Rodriguez return would be a back of the top 100 prospect or a couple of guys who aren't too far away from that, wouldn't shock me at all. And especially you look at the Dodgers would be able to give up a young but close to the big leagues ready pitcher. They have a ton of them. They had the best rotation in the minors we've seen in a long time in Tulsa earlier this year. So if they gave up one of those guys, a Kyle Hurt, a guy like that, River Ryan, guy like that, we're talking about a guy who's probably on the Dodgers starting pitching depth chart, like their fourth, fifth, sixth best pitching prospect in their organization. But that guy would immediately become one of the best prospects in the Tigers organization. If, again, in this theoretical deal that will never happen, like it would have made a difference for the Tigers. I have to imagine Detroit now goes and tries to figure out somewhere else to send him, because Eduardo Rodriguez does not help Detroit by sticking around in Detroit nearly as much as he helps them if they can get something significant in return.
Let's finish with a fan question, a team that we often kind of playfully say we don't cover a ton, although we've gotten them a little more love lately. This is their time of year, and they're going to disappear again into thin air for the next couple months. Elias says, thoughts on the Rockies prospects that they've been getting in trades, and also can make it bigger picture on if you see the vision in terms of the farm system and where you've got them on Baseball America's list right now, because I mean, they're not good on the field, right? There's a few young ball players that have shown flashes, right? And Ryan McMahon's a good ball player. Tovar's having a pretty good year. There is not much else to get really excited about. They just traded away Grichuk and Cron. And if you didn't love Kai Busch and Cuero, I don't think the prospects the Rockies are getting back in that secondary deal from the Angels is going to make much of a difference. So Seeing your facial expressions basically just answered Elias's question.
So to go back to what I was saying, the prospect cost in these moves, especially when you're adding like the Crones and Grichuks of the world, is generally pretty modest. It's not surprising that Colorado didn't get a whole lot there, but no, they didn't. We do like their system. Like, they have a number of kind of interesting guys coming up. I feel like that they are doing a decent job as far as, to go back to development, guys who weren't always first round picks, who end up having, especially I think on the international market, I think they've done pretty well in recent years as far as, an Adiel Amador, for example, or guys like that. But that said, it's really, if you're a Rockies fan, I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot of explanation for how Colorado gets from where they are now to being better than the Dodgers, who are a juggernaut, who spend a lot more money and have a better farm system, or the Giants, who spend a lot more money and have a better big league roster. And again, produce the Patrick Bailey this year, guys like that, or the D-backs, who have one of the best young nucleuses out there with bringing up a Corbin Carroll, still have some guys in the minor leagues as well. The Padres, again, we don't know what the Padres are going to do in this last hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever. But the Padres, who, again, show much more willingness to spend money and have still as many impact talent, prospects in the system, even if they don't have the depth of talent they have in the system as Colorado does. It's not a pretty picture. They're in a very tough division, and generally they've struggled to compete in that division to some level, understandably, but at the same time, if you're in the division with the Dodgers, you're going to have to do a lot really well to compete with the Dodgers, and Colorado's struggled to do that in the last 5 years.
End scene, and they disappeared. We lost them again.
No more Rockies.
We'll see you guys.
Unless they trade
like a white dove. We'll see you in 2089.
Unless they
You're
trade
free.
Elias, their catcher. Then
Elias Diaz?
Yeah,
he's not getting you much either.
Yeah, but we'll talk about it one more time in the next 34 minutes and 53 seconds.
Right,
yes.
right. We will. You're right, because we're approaching the 30-minute mark. Hey, JJ, great to catch up with you as always. Appreciate it, man. Enjoy these last 30.
Thanks for the love, JJ.
Hopefully there's more stuff going on here.
Back in the
Always
day.
good to see
Appreciate
you guys.
it. Thanks for the love.